Welcome to my guide on S0-Anby. Watching the whole video will give you a better understanding of how Anby functions and her role in any team, but if you're just looking for quick build recommendations, I will provide some at the end of the video. Please like and subscribe if you find the guide informative, and let's jump in. Anby is an S-rank electric melee attack unit from the Defense Force Silver Squad faction. She has a simple gameplay loop where she charges up a star mark on enemies, which she then spends for increased bursts of damage. She's an attack unit focused around the new Aftershock damage type, which triggers extra instances of damage or attacks from off-field units. Anby's role in Aftershock teams is that of a driver who increases squad-wide Aftershock damage while staying on field herself, pumping out consistent damage. While Anby will truly shine in Aftershock-focused teams, she's a complete and fully functional electric unit on her own, who can be slotted into any hypercarry squad setup. She is truly going to shine with units like Pulchra, Trigger, or future units that have an emphasis on utilizing Aftershock damage. But she's already an amazing pickup for anyone looking to lean into an Aftershock team in the future, or just looking to expand their electric roster. Since Anby is our first S-rank unit that makes use of the new Aftershock mechanic, I figured I'd take a moment just to clarify what an Aftershock is and what it does. So an Aftershock is a new type of passive follow-up attack that causes an extra instance of damage, or is an attack done from an off-field unit under certain conditions. In most cases, it has both a daze and an attack motion value like any other offensive move, and there are bonuses tied specifically to Aftershock attacks. All three units introduced in patch 1.6, Anby, Pulchra, and Trigger, are focused around Aftershock attacks, and we shouldn't be surprised if some future units also incorporate Aftershocks in their kits in one way or another. Now over to Anby's specific mechanics. The core of Anby's gameplay revolves around her Silver Star mark, which appears on any enemies she attacks. The Silver Star will remain on all affected units until the end of a combat scenario, or until they are defeated. However, the mark is only active and visible when Anby is on field. So during swaps, it will momentarily disappear and remove any bonuses it would have provided to any other units. By itself, the Silver Star mark doesn't do anything to the marked target, but it does give bonuses to Anby and any Aftershock damage that hits a marked target. In addition to these bonuses, the main combat function of the Silver Star mark is actually that of a gauge. With each of Anby's attacks, the Silver Star begins to charge up, represented by a part of the mark changing to a brighter blue color. Each of Anby's attacks provides different amounts of charge to the gauge, with continued attacks gradually charging it until one of the three notches in the Silver Star is filled. These notches are called White Thunder Points, and once a point is reached, the corresponding section of the mark will be fully lit up. Just a quick side note here, each section of the gauge actually starts and ends behind the White Thunder Points. So sometimes it may look like a hit might not have generated any gauge. However, this is not the case and it's just a visual problem we'll have to deal with during gameplay. Continued attacks to a marked target will keep filling the gauge, and once the final White Thunder Point is reached, the entire mark will start pulsating, and the White Thunder Points will gain an extra orange glow. At this stage, we must spend the accumulated White Thunder Points before we can generate more. The way we spend these points is tied to Anby's special attack, which we'll go over in the next section. The White Thunder Points are the core mechanic we need to keep track of during Anby's gameplay, and while most of the time the process of filling up a Silver Star will happen naturally, we will need to keep track of which enemies are marked and how many White Thunder Points they've accumulated, especially during battles with elite or boss enemies. Now let's start with the most important part of Anby's kit, her special and EX special attack. That said, her normal special attack isn't too important by itself. Even with enough energy for an EX special, this is the default attack Anby does when tapping the special attack button. It's a quick two-part attack which snaps to an enemy from mid-range, and has Anby dash to the enemy with a diagonal slash, followed by a cross slash. The attack generates a solid amount of Silver Star gauge by itself, and it lets Anby skip the first hit of her basic attack string, but the motion value of the attack is so low that I would recommend against ever using this attack if possible. The more important version of the special attack comes into play once we have at least one White Thunder Point on an enemy. When this is the case, the new default attack that comes out when we tap the special attack button is a very quick dash with a lot of range. Once this attack connects with an enemy, it consumes 1/3 of the Silver Star mark, meaning we can perform 3 consecutive attacks with a fully charged mark. The dash itself has a very low motion value, but consuming the White Thunder Point causes an extra hit of Aftershock to trigger on an enemy whose point was consumed, which is where most of the damage from the attack comes from. A single dash can trigger multiple points of White Thunder from different enemies. But while the dash itself can hit multiple targets, the triggered point is strictly a single target hit. Also, as a nice defensive bonus, S0-Anby is invulnerable during this attack, removing any danger of actually using this ability. There's also a passive tied to her special attack, which causes another instance of Aftershock to trigger on an enemy that has been hit by 3 consecutive White Thunder points. There are limitations to triggering this extra hit, which the skill description is a bit unclear on. But to trigger this extra instance of Aftershock, all 3 White Thunder points need to be consumed in quick succession. So we can't weave any attacks between the White Thunder triggers, and we can't delay the triggers either. If all 3 attacks do hit in quick succession, a lightning strike will strike the affected enemy, indicating that the aftershock damage has occurred. This lightning strike is, although small, an area of effect hit, meaning it can hit multiple targets if they are grouped closely together. And finally, S0-Anby's EX special has a high motion value of electric damage with a cost of 60 energy. To use the attack, we need to hold down the special attack button, which has S0-Anby throwing her twin swords out in a mid-sized circle in front of her. Outside the attack's high damage, its main utility is that it applies a fully charged Silver Star mark to any enemy hit by the full attack, making it one of the fastest ways to max out the charge of a Silver Star. After the attack finishes, S0-Anby can skip straight into basic 4, which isn't very useful since as soon as we have a fully charged Silver Star, we'd preferably just expend it as fast as possible instead of overcapping on charge. And of course, during the attack animation of her EX special, S0-Anby is invulnerable, ensuring higher survivability while using this attack at opportune moments. S0-Anby's core passive is a very simple damage boost and is tied to her Silver Star mark. Any enemy with the mark will take a percentage more damage from all of S0-Anby's damaging sources. And as another bonus, any aftershock damage done to an enemy with the Silver Star will have its crit damage increased by a percentage of S0-Anby's crit damage. Just to really make this clear, this bonus to aftershock is squad wide and doesn't just affect S0-Anby's personal aftershock damage. S0-Anby's additional ability is activated when she's paired with a stun or a support squad member. When active, S0-Anby's crit rate is increased by a flat 10%, and whenever S0-Anby is the active unit on field, all aftershock damage against a target with a Silver Star mark on them is increased by 25%. Just like her core passive, this is a very simple but strong additional ability, and a priority to activate when bringing S0-Anby into a squad. In tandem with her core passive, this ability really emphasizes S0-Anby's role as a driver for aftershock focused teams, thanks to all the damage increases they provide to aftershock attacks. At first glance, S0-Anby's basic attack is a very simple and fast 5-hit combo where all hits do electric damage. There are 2 ways to perform the most basic version of her combo. Either we continuously tap away at her basic attack button, or we tap once and then hold down the button, which will complete the full string of attacks. The motion values of the attacks are backloaded, with the 4th hit dealing the most damage. This is actually a very nice feature because this combo has some different properties when we're not just attacking air. If we do either version of the normal basic attack against an enemy, S0-Anby will repeat the 4th hit up to 5 times, resulting in a 9-hit combo. This version of the attack is the standard string of attacks that will occur during combat, and while there seems to be some variation in generation of Silver Star gauge, a full 9-hit combo will generate about 50% of the mark. So 2 full combos will lead to a fully charged Silver Star in most cases. While the previously mentioned version of the basic attack is enough for all situations, there is one more extension to the combo that slightly increases the Silver Star charge. If we perform the combo as usual and reach the 3rd hit, where S0-Anby throws her 2 swords at the enemy, we can pause briefly to trigger a finisher move. Afterward, we can resume the combo again, starting from the 4th hit, and continue as normal by either holding down the basic attack button or by continuously tapping it. Adding this additional attack generates just under 2 White Thunder points if we complete the whole 10-hit combo. We'll talk more about the use case of this version of the combo in the gameplay section. Like most units, S0-Anby has a standard dodge that can be used in all directions. This dodge can then be followed up by a surprisingly high motion value dash attack that causes electric damage. This dash attack can be used to skip the first hit of S0-Anby's basic attack string, which is a very nice bonus since the dash attack always has a higher motion value than the first hit of her basic attacks. Additionally, the dash attack generates the same amount of Silver Star gauge as a basic attack, so there's no downside to replacing the first hit with a dash attack. This is especially useful since it boosts survivability as well, because if the dodge is timed perfectly, it can lead into a dodge counter. For Anby's dodge counter, she jumps into the air and does a vertical spinning slash downwards, causing high electric damage. As soon as the attack ends, Anby can go straight into the second hit of her basic attack string, again, skipping the weakest part of the combo. The dodge counter itself also generates about 50% of the silver star gauge per use, making it one of the best gauge generating moves Anby has in her kit. Anby's quick assist is a fast attack that looks exactly the same as her dodge counter. However, this attack only generates about the same amount of silver star gauge as a basic attack. Anby has a defensive assist, which she can follow up with a heavy hitting counter of electric damage, which generates about 20% of a silver star gauge. Anby's chain attack is very simple and just a high motion value hit of electric damage. It's a flashy move but generates the same amount of silver star gauge as a normal assist follow-up attack. It's a strong hit, the second highest single hit motion value attack, but not much more than that. Speaking of which, Anby's ultimate is her highest single hit motion value move. On activation, the attack does multiple slashes to anything in front of her, followed by a large X strike and then a lightning strike. In addition to its high damage, it has a great utility where the final lightning strike also fully charges any silver star it hits, tying it with the EX special for the quickest way to fully charge a silver star mark. Anby's core passive is the most important priority to level up first, thanks to the large improvement it has on Anby's overall damage. At max rank, having a constant 25% damage increase to everything she does is way too important to ignore, and the fact that it also increases all aftershock damage, not only her own, is another testament to her position as a driver in aftershock teams. Equally as important is her special attack with how much we will be using it. As an on-field damage dealer, the amount of energy Anby will generate will lead to a lot of EX specials, which leads to more White Thunder hits. It really feeds into itself and therefore is Anby's highest priority among her offensive skills. By the nature of Anby's high field time, her basic attack is the next priority. We will be constantly using them to generate energy, silver star gauge, and ultimate charge, so having the basic attacks at a high rank is a good choice not only for the damage increase. The chain attack and ultimate is the third priority simply because we will be using them a lot, and adding on high motion values of damage is always a nice bonus. Finally, dodge and assist can be left at lower ranks if resources are running thin. However, I would recommend bringing them up at least a couple of ranks since the motion values do become very respectable. Anby's gameplay loop is incredibly simple at its core. We build 3 White Thunder points through various attacks, then spend them with her special attack. There's not a lot of depth to the loop since once we fully charge a silver star, we should quickly use it and start charging up the next one. Most of Anby's damage comes from her bursts of aftershock, so it's best to keep the flow going. The only time we might consider saving a charge star is when the enemy is about to enter a stun window. As with most units, we want to do most of our burst damage when the damage multipliers are active on an enemy. Additionally, since Anby's EX special and ultimate both fully charge a star, we should use these liberally. Again, unless we're close to a stun window. We also don't really need to consider anything specific for teams focused around aftershock damage when Anby is the driver, since she naturally wants to be on field as much as possible, which will trigger aftershock effects from other units and increase the damage of said attacks thanks to Anby's core passive and additional ability. So even though Anby's gameplay is as simple as it is, there are a couple of things that are useful to know. The first of which is how much her different attacks charge a silver star. I did mention the silver star generation in passing in the skills and abilities section, but it's always a lot easier to have this type of information in one place. Oh, and while we're on the topic of gauge generation, sometimes it can be difficult to check how charged a star is during combat with all the damage numbers covering it. So if you don't mind not seeing the numbers, they can be turned off in the options menu under the other tab. This can make it a bit easier to manage the silver stars if you're struggling. There's some variation in gauge generation depending on different attacks. But to give you a frame of reference, using Anby's basic 1 requires hitting an enemy 8 times to reach the first White Thunder point, with each subsequent point requiring 7 hits. So in total, we'll need 22 hits to fully charge a silver star using only basic 1. Hopefully this makes it a bit easier to understand the gauge generation in this section. A quick assist, dash attack, and basic attacks all generate about 1 hit worth of gauge. A special attack generates 3 hits worth of gauge. A chain attack generates 5 hits worth of gauge, and an assist follow-up generates 6. The basic 9-hit combo generates 11 hits worth of gauge, which is about 50% of the silver star, while the 10-hit combo generates 13 hits of gauge. A dodge counter generates 11 hits worth of gauge, which is just as much as the 9-hit basic combo. An EX special where most of the hits connect with an enemy generates a full silver star. And finally, the final lightning strike of the ultimate also generates a full silver star. Now with this information, we'll talk a bit more about the two main combos to keep in mind for gauge generation. Combo 1, the normal 9-hit combo. Using this twice will usually lead to a fully charged silver star, making it a solid baseline in most scenarios. However, we can improve it by starting the combo with a dash attack. A dash attack not only slightly boosts the damage output of the combo, but also guarantees a fully charged star after 2 full uses. Plus, this also synergizes well with Anby's best drive disc set, which we'll discuss more in the drive disc section. Combo 2, the 10-hit combo. Using this combo twice will overcap the silver star a bit, which isn't ideal, so it's better not to rely on this as our go-to combo. However, if we use this combo after a dodge counter, it will fully charge a star, making it one of the best ways to generate gauge, only topped by 2 back-to-back dodge counters. Now with these two combos in mind, we can set up a method for slowly improving our gameplay with Anby. The first thing we should do is get a feel for her basic 9-hit combo, along with focusing on using as many perfect dodge counters as possible since it's one of Anby's best gauge generators. Then when we're comfortable with the normal 9-hit combo, we can add on the dash attack to the start of every combo for that extra damage and gauge. The next step is to get a feel for the 10-hit combo after a perfect dodge counter. This one will require some knowledge about the enemies we're up against, since not every counter should be followed up with basic attacks. A lot of enemies, bosses specifically, have multiple hit moves that will punish us if we get too greedy. But we can of course abuse this as well with the final thing I recommend incorporating into Anby's gameplay. 2 well-timed back-to-back dodge counters will fully charge a silver star, which we then can spend with 3 special attacks. If we get good at dodging with Anby, we can play extremely safe since we have enough invisibility frames from both the dodges, dodge counters, and the white thunder hits to avoid most damage. Not only that, the time it takes to perform the full combo will also give us enough time for the dodge counters to recover, so we can do it all over again. And as an extra tip, since the EX special fully charges a star, if we're ever nearing max energy, we can throw in an EX special just as we deplete a full star. This will be a big burst of damage since we get so many aftershock triggers in a short amount of time. And it's a very safe move since Anby has even more invisibility frames during her EX special animation. With all these combinations of attacks in mind, we should be able to handle almost any scenario. But I really want to emphasize the importance of always fully charging a silver star. Even though it can be tempting to pump out that quick extra damage or reset a silver star charge, avoid ever just using a single white thunder point. Most of Anby's damage comes from her aftershocks, and with all the bonuses her kit provides, we'll miss out on a lot of damage by not triggering the extra aftershock at the end of a fully spent silver star. Now finally, let's end this section on a burst combo which we'd like to save for whenever an enemy becomes stunned. As with most burst windows, we'd like to have enough energy for at least 1 EX special and have an ultimate ready. Before starting a chain attack on a stunned enemy, make sure that they have a fully charged silver star mark on them. The burst combo then starts by completing the chain attack on Anby, followed by quickly spending the star. Next we use our ultimate, which fully charges the next star, which we then expend again. After that we finish everything off with an EX special, which charges a 3rd star, which we then again spend. Depending on how long an enemy is stunned for, we might not have enough time to do the final EX special. But if there is enough time available, the order of using ultimate or EX special doesn't really matter, as long as everything happens during the stun window. If there is enough time, it might also be a good idea to use a dash attack or a basic attack between expending the 1st star and using the ultimate. This helps refresh any W engine buffs we might have or need. Anby's signature W engine, Severed Innocence, is easily her strongest option. At rank 1 and level 60, the engine provides 713 base attack and 48% crit damage as an advanced stat. The engine effect is threefold, where the first bonus is an unconditional crit damage increase of 30%. Secondly, whenever the equipper hits an enemy with a basic attack, a special attack, or an aftershock, they gain 1 stack of a buff. Each stack of this buff is tied to one of the aforementioned attacks, and their duration of 30 seconds are calculated separately, meaning multiple hits of the same attack will only refresh its own buff. Each stack of the buff increases the equipper's crit damage by 10% for another 30% in total when each of the stacks are active. When this happens, the final part of the engine effect takes place, which increases the equipper's electric damage by 20%. The Severed Innocence is an incredibly overloaded engine when it comes to crit damage, since it provides a whopping 108% crit damage once all 3 stacks of its buffs are rolling, while also increasing electric damage. Just for reference, reaching similar numbers of crit damage from substat rolls alone would require 23 rolls, or 13 if we're using a crit damage disc in slot 4. This means that it's going to be impossible to reach similar damage numbers using other engine options. However, Anby's damage output is very high even without this engine. So while we won't reach similar damage numbers without this engine, not having it won't be a detriment to Anby as a unit. Don't feel the need to get it unless you really want to. For other engine options, we have the usual suspects when it comes to more accessible choices. Cannon Rotor from the Battle Pass for a crit rate option, and Starlight Engine from the Gadget Shop for an attack option. Then the Event Engine Marcado Desire is also a great option if you have access to it. As always, engine ranks matter when comparing engines of similar rarity, so go for the one with the highest rank available. Out of the aforementioned options, my recommendation would be to go with the Starlight Engine or Marcado Desire, depending on if we want more attack or more crit rate. Both are great options, but will require some maintenance if we want to keep the engine effect active, especially during Anby's burst window. Then, when it comes to the 2 S-rank options from the Residual Signal Shop, Nekomata's Steel Cushion and Soldier 11's The Brimstone, Anby's in the, until now, unique position where she is better off using one of the A-rank engines instead of one of these. The Brimstone, which is normally a universal great option for attack units, unfortunately loses a lot of value because of the low duration of its engine effect. During a burst window when Anby will unleash as many special attacks as she can, she doesn't have enough time to rebuild the attack buff this engine provides, losing most of the buffs before she's able to finish her burst combo. So unfortunately, it's mostly only valuable during the build up to a burst phase. And Steel Cushion is extremely conditional and is at risk of almost never allowing for its engine effect to become relevant. And the fact that Anby only does electric damage through all of her attacks makes the other part of the engine effect completely useless. So in short, stick with the Starlight Engine or Marcado Desire unless you have access to one of the previously released limited attack engines. And in the future, if we get access to an A-rank engine with crit damage as an advanced substat, this engine will most likely be Anby's preferred option. Just something to keep an eye out for. With Anby's release, we also got a new drive disc set called Shadow Harmony, which is made for units focused around aftershock damage. The set's 2-piece bonus increases the damage of aftershocks and dash attacks by 15%, and the 4-piece provides a stacking buff that increases both combat attack and crit rate by 4% per stack. This buff can stack up to 3 times for a total of 12% crit rate and combat attack, but it's limited to generating these stacks through dash attacks and aftershocks that are of the same element as the equipper. This is actually a bit more limiting than expected since a lot of units' dash attacks, no matter their element, will be a physical attack. However, this isn't an issue for Anby since her dash attack does electric damage, easily making this her best 4-piece option. As an alternative, the Thunder Metal drive disc set also has the potential to be a good option for Anby. But if we use this set, Anby will need a team that can help her both quickly apply and maintain the shock attribute anomaly throughout a fight. Typically, a mono-electric team is able to do this, so if you have a good Thunder Metal set available on another unit, feel free to use it on Anby while farming the Shadow Harmony set. As for 2-piece sets, Anby is very flexible in her choices. However, the go-to set is going to be the Woodpecker Electro for the extra 8% crit rate. We want to give Anby as many external sources, as in non-substat rolls of crit rate as we can, so that we can focus on crit damage substat rolls instead. But for example, if we get a lot of crit rate substat rolls on our discs, we could of course go for the Branch and Blade Song set to give ourselves a boost to crit damage this way instead. Therefore, the Woodpecker Electro is my primary recommendation, with Branch and Blade Song being the secondary 2-piece option. The drive disc main stats to go for are crit damage or crit rate for disc 4, electric damage or pen percent for disc 5, and attack percent for disc 6. For slot 4, I heavily recommend the crit damage disc over a crit rate disc. While we can pick either, Anby gets a lot of crit rate from drive disc sets, W engines, and her additional ability, so the value of crit damage is going to be higher. Even more so because any aftershock damage done when Anby is on field will have its crit damage increased by a percentage of Anby's crit damage through her core passive. Disc 5 should be an electric damage percent disc in almost any case, since Anby doesn't have any innate ways of getting a higher electric damage percent. The only case when a pen percent disc would be on the map as an option would be in a team with Rina, since she makes the value of pen percent so much higher. Disc 6 only has attack percent as a viable option, since the other available rolls on this disc won't increase Anby's damage any further. I've mentioned Anby's preferred stats in passing in other sections, but I'll take some time to clarify my recommendations here, starting off with her crit rate. With at least rank E in her core passive, Anby's base crit rate is 19.4%. Then she gets another 10% from her additional ability, and 8% if we use the Woodpecker Electro 2-piece set. And from the 4-piece Shadow Harmony set, she gets another 12% when it's fully stacked. In total, this puts Anby at 49.4% crit rate during combat without any crit rate substat rolls. Adding on a crit rate engine on top of all this lands Anby on just over 65, 69, or 73% crit rate, depending on engine rank. I hope this explanation also solidifies why the crit damage disc in slot 4 is the preferred option in almost any case. With this many ways of getting crit rate, it allows us to focus Anby's substats into her primary stat, crit damage. But while we want to have her crit damage as high as possible, crits base its damage off the attack stat, so as a secondary stat, aim for attack percent. When looking for good discs to invest in, I would recommend going for ones with at least 2 useful substats on them, where one of the stats is crit damage. Ideally, we'd also want a third substat to be crit rate, where we aim for 1 crit rate for every 2 crit damage we have, but this is for long-term optimizing. As a final quick summary, stack as much crit damage as possible while looking for discs with attack percent on them while doing so, and any crit rate we're able to pick up along the way is always a nice bonus. Flat attack or flat pen are also alright options, but a lot less desirable compared to the other offensive stats. Now for a quick summary of Anby's Mindscapes. M1 triggers 3 instances of White Thunder on an enemy hit by Anby's EX special attack. This effect doesn't consume any White Thunder points, so it's just a big burst of extra damage. M2 increases Anby's crit rate by another 12%, and after using her ultimate, she gains a buff called Thunder's Cry. On special attacks that would consume a White Thunder point, a stack of Thunder's Cry is consumed instead, allowing for even more uses of a single silver star. M4 simply lets Anby ignore 12% Electro Res on enemies with a silver star mark on them. And finally, M6 adds a massive nuke of electric damage after Anby triggers 6 instances of White Thunder. Anby is very much a complete unit without any of these extra Mindscapes. She doesn't need any of these to function, so don't feel the need to pull for more than a single copy. Anby is a complete and fully functional electric unit all by herself and doesn't need a lot of extra support. However, she is clearly made to be the driver for Aftershock teams, so she is going to have a lot of synergies and get a power spike with units like Pulchra and Trigger compared to with anything else. But for more general teams, as with most attack units, Anby does enjoy a stun and support setup, where this stun unit have low field time requirements, allowing Anby to shine. And any support will be a great fit in any of Anby's squads. That said, Astra is by far the best support for Anby, since she is currently the only unit with a buff to crit damage, along with all the other bonuses she brings in as a support. So for a couple of squad examples, we have the paradoxical Soldier S0-Anby with Anby and Nicole for a free-to-play squad. Anby with Pulchra opens up a lot of options with Astra, Rina and Lucy as the supports. Anby Caesar also works great since we can use Lucy here as well, or even better, Astra, which lets Anby truly take on a hypercarrier role. Anby, Coleda and Lucy is also a solid option, although with a bit less synergy compared to other teams. And finally, a squad with Anby and Trigger will truly showcase Anby's true potential. Here we can also double down on stun and aftershock with Pulchra, or completing Anby's currently best team with Astra. As you can see, there are quite a few permutations of teams, and with more future Aftershock focused units, and perhaps even an Aftershock focused support, we're sure to see even more of Anby's power. I hope you were able to get something valuable out of this video and that it will help you improve your gameplay while using Anby. Please like the video if you learned something and subscribe for more guides. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.